I'm going to welcome up our panelists. First, Drew Banin, who's the co-founder and chief product officer, yes, of DBT Labs. Hello, Drew. Julia Schottenstein, who's a product manager at DBT Labs and works for Drew. And Pedram Naveed, the co-founder, CEO, and executive regional SVP of business development for LATAM at West Marin Data. Cool. So the title of this is Hot or Not, and I think the implication is that we'd be serving up some really spicy takes on data trends. But we're going to take a little bit of a different spin on it. First, I think we got plenty of spicy takes the other night with Drew and Ben's wings eating competition. But second, I think we all felt like there's a lot of cynicism and pessimism sometimes, both in society at large, but also in the data discourse. And it's very fashionable to be a critic. So we wanted to cut against that a little bit and mostly focus on stuff we're optimistic about. DJ's keynote this morning and even what Pete was just saying in terms of bringing new things into the world, we want to try to be as focused as possible on things we're looking forward to, we're excited about, and a little bit less on picking on things. So we're going to take that as sort of the theme. We're going to go through a bunch of stuff that we've collected, and we're going to talk about stuff we're excited about and the panelists are excited about. We'll also do some Q&A. So if folks have things that come to mind you're excited about or you're wondering if it's worth being excited about, we'll have a chance to do some audience questions as well, or we hope to. So cool. So I'm going to start by just going around and ask each of our panelists to start and tell us something they're excited about for the next few years of data. So Pedram, I'm going to start with you because you're down in the end. We'll work this way. Perfect. What's something you're excited about and optimistic about for the next few years of data?
I've been patiently waiting for streaming to become easier, and I feel like 2023 is the year of streaming. I also felt that about 2022, but this time it feels even...
Why is it different this time?
Every year we're just that much closer to making it easier, and maybe it's not this year, but it's going to be in the next, I think, 2 to 5 years at least, that we get better with streaming. The world is streaming, data comes in streaming, and then we just chop it up and make it a big old batch party. It doesn't feel great. Sometimes I think things might be simpler if we had the right ways to work with streaming data.
Do you think on 5, 10 years, some reasonable horizon, we'll even make the distinction? Or do you think things will just work as streaming by default? Because that's the way the world works.
I hope so. I don't want to think about batch. It's just like a pain, right? Orchestration, the fact that data is just coming in choppy, and we don't really operate in that world naturally when we think about the data coming in. We want to act on events, we want to act on things that are happening as they're happening. So ideally, yeah, we don't have to. Probably not, because we're not that lucky, but we'll see.
We'll see. Are there specific things you're most excited about that you think will be enabling for streaming?
I think it might actually simplify a lot of problems we're trying to solve today. Even if you think about a simple pipeline with a 5-stranded DBT, Snowflake, and a BI tool or a reverse ETL solution, there's a lot of complexity because you're trying to orchestrate timelines between these things, and you want your data in your Salesforce with a certain lag, and you got to work backwards to figure that out. And you're doing these things even though maybe nothing happened to the data, but you just can't tell. Some of that goes away with streaming if you can materialize things and the data is just moving through the system and affecting things as it needs to, then you don't have to sort of think about those things. But we'll see.
Well, that's a very optimistic take. I hope it's true.
Me too.
Huge if true.
Yeah, it's going to be
awesome. Great. Julia, what is something you're optimistic or excited about?
I think if I were to synthesize it as the thing I'm most excited about is data teams are going to be able to do more with less. So what do I mean by that? What is doing more? So everyone's kind of solved the basic hierarchy of needs. You have reporting, you have visibility into your business, metrics. What's next? I'm really excited about data teams having your cloud data platforms really be that source of truth to create net new workflows, to create data applications. Imagine you have product analytics to inform your sales and marketing motion. Maybe you have more personalization, both internally and externally customer facing. I think we're all buzzing a lot about AI. people are still figuring out, how do I use that at my organization? What opportunities can I see? But I think in the next 5 years, that will become a lot clearer, and it'll be a lot more natural to have AI applications building off of the same data that's in your cloud data platforms today, and it'll be your source of truth. So that's the more part. And it's always exciting to do more with more. But I think what is interesting, and I really am excited about, I think it's possible we'll be able to do more with actually less. And so in the next few years, I can see us being far more efficient about when we have to build data models, and more importantly, when we don't have to build data models. The work to author data pipelines takes a lot of energy from teams today. I think machines will help make that a lot easier. You won't have to move your data around quite as much. And I think the barrier for participating in machine learning workflows and also doing a lot of this work is just going to go a lot lower. So that's what I'm very excited about as we get to this new maturity curve of being able to do more with less.
That's awesome. I love that. Drew, what about you?
You're going to think that this is nuts. I'm excited about data mesh. And this is a really big 180 for me. I made a joke the other night, but it's a true statement. I got blocked by the Data Mesh Learn Twitter account. I don't know if the person who runs that account is in the audience.
Let him
It's also
in.
blocked.
If you're watching, please unblock Drew.
Please unblock
He's served his term.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn. Okay, why did I get blocked by the mesh? It's because I tweeted data mesh is chuggy, which is a slightly dated reference. But fundamentally, it was very confusing to me. I couldn't wrap my hands around it. I didn't understand why people were saying these words that didn't make a ton of sense. And what has happened in the past couple of years is that we've grown at DBT Labs, and I've gotten to meet people doing data work at much bigger companies. And what you see is there isn't one data team doing data. There are 20 data teams. And it's so big that people on the one data team don't know the names of the other data people who get their data, who they get their data from, or who use their data downstream. And so everything mesh clicked into place for me. It's about kind of contractualizing what you expect to get from upstream, what you intend to provide to people downstream. And it's sort of like a way of giving all these different teams autonomy without the Wild West ensuing and no guarantees about anything. So all the flexibility that the teams want, but kind of the coherence, the governance that is kind of necessary to run the practice. I think it's a beautiful problem statement. I'm excited about helping DBT better solve those kinds of problems.
Beyond DBT, which of course, we all love, are there other enabling technologies or things that you're specifically excited about when it comes to the data mesh?
Yeah, I think it's a very cool kind of problem and orientation because the technology is a big part of it, but it's also very much about setting clear expectations with your stakeholders and committing to a contract and making sure that you're not going to change that contract next week. These things need to be durable. So you get a lot of opportunities to do the kind of structural collaboration that's actually necessary for people to do anything with data. And the sort of mesh constructs compel you to have those conversations. You have to codify your contracts, your SLAs.
So data contracts are the key to the data mesh.
Okay, there's a lot of words we can anchor to it, but as a concept, the idea of what we do with web APIs, here's version 1, it's documented, you can use it in this way. When we change the behavior, we'll issue a new version of the API. It's just bringing that to data teams and treating coworkers as more of an external party that has to go through the same API that you guarantee, I think is how this stuff is going to scale.
That's cool. I want to build on something you kind of alluded to there, which is, DBT, you're starting to work with bigger customers. And I think I have to remind myself sometimes too that most big customers, I see this too as we start working with bigger customers, are very early in their data maturity curves. It's easy for a lot of us here in the modern data stack world to be oh yeah, a warehouse with pipelines and now we're going to streaming. It's all old hat and we're already looking toward the future. But for most big companies, that's pretty early. Are you optimistic about the pace of adoption and the depth of adoption of this stuff getting deeper?
I think so. I will say that 3 years ago, the story was a little bit more crisp and clear. And anymore, there's like a lot of technology options and ways to assemble them, which is still a good thing. But if you're coming from like an on-prem database and the workflow tools that you would use with an on-prem database, and now you're coming to the cloud as an entire organization, let alone the data practice, you have a lot of hard questions to answer about how you do that.
That's interesting. Julia or Pedram, any optimism to be shown on bigger companies coming into the modern world?
I think you have to relearn a lot when you move to the cloud data warehouse from running your data on-prem. But I think the question of like, is this a good thing? Is this safe? Doesn't come up nearly as much as it used to, which is hugely exciting for me. And why that's like something to be very optimistic about is because once you're replatformed on the cloud, there's a whole ecosystem of composable tools that can enable new workflows where hard things just become a whole lot easier. And I'm seeing, it's not all at once, but take business units or teams will lift and shift a big portion of their workflows to the cloud. And that might take a year of investment, but once they're on there, you can just see a dramatic change in the trajectory of what they can do with their data. And so I think the question of like going to cloud just doesn't come up nearly as much. It's still a lot of effort. But I do think that there's a lot to be optimistic there.
Cool. Anything to add?
Nothing. Perfect.
Perfect. No notes. You said something about the cloud data warehouse sort of being this composable thing. One definition I'd heard someone say about the modern data stack is it's just like assumes a warehouse that speaks SQL. It's just like a bunch of tools that speak SQL at each other. It's like a little reductive, but I am curious if there's any optimism about dynamism in languages. It feels like SQL, Python, maybe R have been hanging around for a long time. SQL certainly is like, it's funny to say, almost gone through this like renaissance, in part because of cloud data warehouses and technologies like dbt. Is there any optimism for the new languages? I mean, Malloy, Prequel, there's like things that could displace Python. Like I keep having people yell at me about polars. Like, anyone optimistic about seeing more dynamism in the languages these things speak, or is there a good reason to want that?
I can, okay, am I optimistic that Prequel Malloy will replace SQL in the next 2 years? The majority of workloads? Like, no, definitely not. But I had a cool chat with Carlin earlier, who I think is very smart and awesome, and he had, hi Carlin, great insight. So I'm just gonna parrot back kind of what he said to me, and it was like, these changes take a long time. So we got from, writing assembly in C to JavaScript over the course of decades, and the transition from JavaScript to TypeScript took 6-7 years. So it's not a thing that happens overnight, but two things happen. One is the language evolves and the tool chain around it evolves. But then also you get this critical mass of understanding of why different is better. So I'll say my personal belief is that SQL isn't going anywhere. But I'm excited about the kinds of innovations that are happening in different kinds of SQL engines. So like DuckDB has built some really cool ergonomic stuff into SQL that I think is awesome. And I hope that some of the principles that come out of Prequel Malloy will make their way into, implementations of SQL as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if it's just further speciation of SQL that is the future. SQL forever. Anyone else takes on languages?
Yeah, I think more choice is always better, and there are different languages that do different jobs better. And so letting people choose the right language for whatever application they need makes a lot of sense. And there's a reason why SQL can't do everything. Like some problems just aren't well described in SQL. Like try doing anything predictive or linear regression in SQL, you can't. So more choice is better. I think some of the newer languages have some really interesting properties to them where you have better kind of relationships or semantics built in, which I think is very, very exciting. And I hope that we'll find exciting applications to use those languages as well. Languages are a really funny thing. They have incredible staying power. When you think of like SQL, when was it first built? It was like the late 70s.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a technology that's been around for 50 years, and we're still talking about it on stage at a tech-forward conference.
Everything else has changed except that.
But it's often because of the ecosystem that pops up around the language, and it's all the warehouses speak SQL, so you have the engines. You also have tooling around linting and the IDEs that are, everyone has this learned SQL, both analysts but also business users. So imagine trying to retrain an entire workforce to learn some other technology. It's like a really kind of daunting thing. So when you look at just how languages have evolved over time, like the top 3 most popular languages have been the top 3 most popular languages for the last decade. And one of them is Java. So I think SQL has staying power because of the ecosystem, but more choice is definitely better. And SQL can't solve all problems, and I'm really excited to see some of these languages try to handle like entities and relationships in a more modern way.
I got one. All right. So I will say SQL will maybe evolve and continue to support some of the things it's not good at. There was a talk just yesterday about adding metrics to SQL, for example. Pretty nice concept. Will everyone adopt it? Maybe. And then all our problems will be solved and we'll be happy and we can move on. If not, yeah, then we get 15 different flavors of SQL, which probably not great, but what are you going to do? I mean, the languages we have today aren't that great. Like Python and Pandas, probably not the best language.
Is Wes here?
Data analysis today. Maybe types might be nice one day to know types going in, types going out. Maybe there's a reason Java is used everywhere is because you do get a little bit of safety in there. And I think when you're developing quickly, maybe you don't care about safety, but when you're building at the enterprise level, you kind of have to care about these things. So maybe we get new languages. Maybe we just make the old ones better.
Yeah.
I'm more in favor of improving what we have rather than tearing it down. It's often easier and more fun to build something new. It's a lot harder and more difficult and painful to improve something that's been around for a while, but we'll see.
That is true. All right, let's move down a little bit. Conceptually, going to try to move us down a layer of the stack. You mentioned metrics. I know that's something everyone up on stage here thinks a bunch about. I am personally optimistic for the coming year and a lot of dynamism and new stuff in and around metrics. I know you all think about this a lot. I'm going to start with Drew, Mr. Metrics. Tell us about, what are you optimistic about in the next year for metrics beyond just,
Please.
what's it directly
Mr.
for?
Metrics was my father.
Mr.
Call me Sam Antic Layer.
Oh, God.
So, okay.
Last session of the week.
I'm pretty amped about metrics in the semantic layer. And I think it's going to do a lot of really fantastic things for BI, traditional BI experiences. We have a very cool integration with Hex. Awesome. That's good. That's well understood. Increasingly, when I just use like operational tools day to day, Jira, Datadog, like the things that I log into, I try to picture like, what's the metric that I want to see from the data warehouse in this UI? And it's something like, a Jira bug ticket that shows you customers that were recently impacted by this. So you know like who to reach out to for validation. Or amount of ARR attributable to a feature request, things like that. So there are tools like you can do this, you can get this information in different places. But the idea of all of it coming from like somewhere central, like a data warehouse, through consistent metric definitions and something like a semantic layer, I think it will like totally change what we think of as using data at work. It's not, always going to a dashboard and seeing a chart. It's in context in the tools that you're using every day. Very cool.
I think metrics is going to be a big part of the answer for how we get to the elusive self-serve. That's a conversation that people have been talking about in data for forever. It's like, how do you get your business users to self-serve and ask questions of their data and get answers? And the hard part is that if you don't have some kind of governance that's owned by a centralized data team that curates maybe your top tier metrics, ARR shows up accurately no matter where it's queried, customers show up accurately no matter where it's queried, you're going to wreak havoc on your organization. And so for me, I think metrics is really exciting because it's such an important piece of the puzzle to get to a self-serve data team. a self-serve business, and the data team can really enable that by setting up metrics for the organization.
All right, DBT infomercial, please. I share your optimism. Pedram, any?
I also share it. I love metrics. I think they're great. I can't wait to see more of them. I don't know where they belong. I don't know what the right language is to use them. I think a lot more about the developer experience of writing metrics. That to me is really important. If we don't nail that, then nobody will want to write them and no one will be able to use them. So if you can get that done well, and no one solved it. I mean, MDX came and went a long time ago. We've seen that. LookML requires a PhD to understand and write. There's a lot of work to be done here, but I think it's obvious that it's work that needs to be done. So look forward to it.
Cool. I'll move us another layer down the stack. I want to talk about storage and warehousing. Feels like we've had the same big players there for a while. Is anyone on stage optimistic about more dynamism in how people are storing and querying data at the sort of, the storage layer, I guess, warehousing layer?
I'll start. I don't care how we store it. And I hope I never have to think about it. I want other people to worry about that for me. It's never been a concern of mine. I've never thought, where is this data stored today? I just need to know that it's somewhere.
Do you think in 5 years that, like, if you pulled this room, what are you using as your data warehouse? I'm guessing there's a pretty good distribution of Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, and then a long tail of other stuff. You get in bigger corporations, you see more like data lake patterns. That's been in vogue. Do you think though, like, do you think in 5 years, if we pulled a similar room, we would have those same big 3 cloud data warehouses?
I think Azure Synapse will probably grow. Anyone who's a Microsoft shop will find a way to continue to use Microsoft. And they're growing slowly, but Microsoft's really good at getting better over time. Look at the adoption of Teams over Slack now. Like, it'll be hard to justify not using it, I would guess, in a few years.
Julia?
Yeah, I think the cloud data platforms have such ecosystem around it that it'll be very hard to change the top 3. And we'll have 3 to 5 that are really meaningful for cloud warehousing or for lakehouse, or pick your term of the month. But I think that there's an enormous market to go after this space. So you'll have a long tail of companies that end up being pretty sizable as well. The top 3 will be, $100 billion companies, and then the long tail can still have really big outcomes as well. And they'll be purpose-built for use cases that maybe aren't best served in the main cloud platform. So seeing a lot of enthusiasm for vectorized databases. That might become really important for new generative AI use cases. We see streaming examples. I think these markets are still very, very big and will have big outcomes there as well. But the top 5, they'll probably be very similar to the ones that we have today.
Cool. You mentioned you said generative AI? Am I getting that right? Generative AI. Yeah, I've been hearing a little bit about this. I think there's a pessimist case for generative AI, both at a societal level. We were talking about this last night, actually, and within data teams that it's gonna eliminate jobs. You're a data analyst, data scientist. It's gonna take your job away, or all of a sudden you don't need these people anymore. And it's happening in a lot of different. It's a fear in a lot of different places. But within data, I think there's these questions. Although also in data, we're very excited about generative AI because it's kind of a data thing. I'm curious, what's the optimistic take, or for anyone on stage optimistic about what generative AI is going to do for data?
Well, we'll all have a lot more time to go outside and
touch grass,
have a picnic
right.
After the UBI rolls in. I'm excited about that.
All right. What's the take?
Is that optimistic?
Yeah, it's good.
Something. I'll just say, I'm inject personally. I do think that the two things will happen. I think a lot of data work is a lot of tedium and drudgery, and I think everyone here who's ever built a data pipeline or had to debug a tricky thing or ever managed a Python package once knows that there's a lot of headbanging that goes into things, and I think that will meaningfully improve. And I think people will be able to spend more time doing creative things. Maybe that means net less hours, but I also think we're still constrained, as far as I can tell, on asking and answering questions of data understanding business context and telling a story around that. So I'm very optimistic of how we will be able to spend our times
Yeah, I
as
think
data
there's a
professionals.
lot we have to figure out still, and there's going to be an interesting partnership between data teams, the new technology, and business users. And how do we have people be able to ask questions of their data in like English or in text and get answers back that make sense? And so it's that same question that we were talking about before. Is like, how do you have the right governance, the right controls, the right frameworks in place, so that more often than not, your generative AI is helping people get to the right answers faster and not like getting a math problem incorrect, which would be kind of scary if you just let it loose. I think we're in the very, very early innings, and I'm optimistic that we'll get to find areas where generative AI will be extremely helpful with data work. We just have to kind of tread carefully.
So, Julia, one thing on the like textual interface topic that I think is so cool. So I saw this demo of, there was like a blog post. It's ChatGPT talking to Wolfram Alpha.
Yeah.
And you ask a question like, how far is it from Chicago to Berlin? And it says it's so many miles. And then you write another question, like, what is that in kilometers? And it tells you. You say, put it on a map, and it shows you a map of like the transit around the globe, and then you say, change the projection to the one that the UN uses, and it like shows you a different map projection. And so it's like this wild iterative process that I think we're always seeking out in data, and that kind of fundamentally is better suited towards like a textual interface than, a point-and-click dashboard experience. Because sometimes you thought you wanted to ask one question and you realize you actually care about something wildly different. And like co-locating those things in a UI is pretty hard, but asking the question is pretty easy. Like sometimes you say it out loud and then, close the web browser and go outside. So I think large language models will help with that.
More time outside. I love it. Cool.
If AI wants to write my docs and tests for me, please do that. I will
Yeah.
let it do that.
Same.
100%.
We touched a little bit on some big macro topic there. Pedram, you told me recently you were optimistic about the benefits of an economic downturn, which is a take. I want to hear you unpack that. Why are you optimistic about economic downturns?
Maybe not in those words.
Your words.
No, maybe.
I wrote them down.
All right. I mean, this was yesterday, right?
Yeah.
There's a few beers in. Okay, what I will say is if things slow down a little bit, maybe our customers will have some time to catch up to us. Things have moved so fast in the last 2 to 3 years. In my consulting work, like I talk to people, they barely understand what modern data stack is, never mind all the components involved. If we can take a breather, slow down, and give them a chance to just build what they need to get some answers and some questions, that might do us all a benefit rather than accelerating the pace at which we develop things. Because we don't really know the right framework for a lot of these things right now at the scale that these enterprises are working at. What we think is the right answer often may not be. So if we slow down a little bit, give them time to adopt, let's figure out where these things work and where they don't, and fix those. That might be a good thing. See.
Responses, reactions?
Yeah, I think the economic downturn and what it means for data teams is going to be interesting. I think data becomes even more important in these times. You have to make a lot of like ruthless decisions, prioritizing constantly. And if you don't have data at your fingertips to make good decisions, you're going to end up making the wrong call. And so it's really framing the data team as an enabler for the business. And more than ever, you need to have that insight to help make good decisions. Like if I'm trying to go across the country, I'm driving, I'm not going to go without a GPS because I'd probably end up lost or not make it something worse. You don't want to make these kinds of decisions for your business in an economic downturn without the table stakes visibility and data at your ready. And I think it's up to data teams to really advocate for their position in economic downturns to help the business navigate them.
That's very well said. Is it logistically possible to do audience questions? There's not like a mic to pass around or something, is there?
Walk up and hold our.
Oh, well, yeah, just speak into my collar. If anyone, curious, audience questions, anyone have one? You could also, yeah, do you want to, I don't know how we do this.
Have a mic.
There. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Scott.
I appreciate the hot takes. So I'm curious how you guys think about fragmentation versus like monolithic solutions. Like, do you think all of this is going to slowly integrate into like one big super company, or one like super stack that basically everyone uses? Or do you think you're going to have a wide ecosystem in certain areas where you have like 1,000 different solutions, but it kind of does the same thing? Like, I'm curious how you guys think about the consolidation versus fragmentation.
Yeah. Back when interest rates were close to zero, there were a lot of blog posts about bundling and unbundling. Haven't seen as many of those in the last couple months. It's a really good question. I think it is like cyclical in nature. And I think a lot of the real innovation happens in the unbundled, you said fragmented, but in the environment where a lot of people are trying a lot of different things and approaching solving familiar problems in new ways. And I think that one of the things that you lose when you bundle is that you're not really best in class at all of those things. You end up being best in class at providing a solution, and it's a valuable solution in some cases. But I think the real innovation happens when people get to solve like specific problems and it's their whole focus. So I think will oscillate forever. I think that's how it works.
Agreed. Cool. Anyone else? We're not leaving. Everyone's stuck here until we have one more question. Yes?
Way in the back. You mentioned interest rates. As interest rates go higher, do you see more of a shift towards cost savings? Maybe something that hasn't been discussed as much this week?
I can take that. Yes, definitely. I think people are conscious of costs and looking at ways to improve. I don't think people are cutting out data altogether and saying we're not doing this anymore, but I think the freewheeling nature of things of the past 2 years has kind of slowed down. In my conversations with companies, they're focusing again on like, wait, what are the actual essentials of a data stack and why are we doing this, rather than just giving free reins to everyone to do whatever they want. Which again, I think is a good thing. I don't think we're well served if anyone is just wasting their time on a data stack. That creates a lot of like confusion and doubt about the merits of it. But maybe in this environment, if we focus on where do we actually provide value, and if we can actually prove that, then I think long term that does better for everyone.
Just to riff on that quickly, like we talked about, in your words, benefits of the economic downturn. I believe that was the quote. And
Making sure everyone knows that's Pendrum's take.
And I don't know. This is the first time I've been a co-founder of a company in an economic climate quite like this one. Maybe some of you, same boat. But it does feel pretty clear that if you can make it through this era, or if you're starting a company and you can exist on the other side, you will have been like forged in the fire. And you can kind of assume that you got you're solving the right problems for real customers. So I think that's a real benefit. Like that's me as a product leader. People using dbt today to help solve these really important problems, I have a lot of confidence that they're going to keep using it a couple years from now, too.
Yeah, I think, personally, I think the focus on cost savings is healthy. Like I think that there was a lot of proliferation of stuff. Proliferation of startups, proliferation of technology, proliferation of people just using stuff without a lot of thought and care on it. And I think that actually caused some problems in its own way. So it's painful. And like, yes, you do see, like just as a vendor, yeah, you see people focused on cost savings. Yeah, it's true probably for everyone. But I don't think it's like, I think there's like a healthiness to it as well. Cool. We got, I saw your hand first, so you're next.
Here we go.
Oh, unless Scott, do you have someone?
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it. Thanks. I think it's interesting when you hear about companies being described as, product-led or engineering-led, sales-led. Curious who you guys see as maybe a data-led company or a data-led organization, if that exists, or if it doesn't, like what that looks like from your perspective?
I have a little bit of a hot take on this. I used to work with a lot of big financial services companies like banks. I think banks figured out way before anyone else that they were data companies. Like the financial services has a massive data like economy, like industry. Like Bloomberg is a massive company and basically just sells data to financial services companies. I think if you look at a lot of the things that banks do fundamentally, it's like looking at data, building models, and understanding risk based on data. And like almost everyone in a bank at some level is a data worker. And so it's interesting, I think, because it's not like necessarily fungible to other industries as much, but I do think having worked with banks, it always struck me that they were data-led companies. They realized that their business actually just really is mostly data and understanding the world through data. So, well, you worked at a bank. Did that resonate with you?
I did, and there was definitely a lot of data, a lot of Teradata, which I heard is coming back this year, so we'll see.
Teradata is back?
Teradata is back.
That's an optimistic take.
That's what I'm saying
We
this
should
year.
have called that one out.
I'm calling it.
I mentioned dynamism and storage. Why don't you bring up Teradata?
Why not, right? We used to ship, they used to ship giant mainframes to, it was literally a warehouse, basically, to get a mainframe. Maybe that's going away, but banks were definitely data-driven. I remember in 2008, we saw like the biggest threat to us were not other banks, it was Apple. Like data and tech were the biggest things that we think about with banks.
Interesting. Julia, it sounded like you had a take.
Yeah, my mind went to fintech companies or banks, and then also operationally intensive companies that have very complex set of things that need to happen, where like a minor improvement in their operational efficiencies have a really big business impact. So think of like all of the delivery companies at scale. Like they're very, very savvy with data because it matters for their business. So whenever you can, you have to care a lot about margin. Data becomes really, really important.
All right, we'll try to do another one or two questions, quickish.
Question for Drew about his optimism for data mesh. So cross-team governance, the problem has existed for a while. So what gives you optimism that it's going to be automation this time and not process? What are you working on to address it?
It's a really good question. It's humbling to, always keep in the back of our heads that old problems, new solutions. And I kind of like Julia's framing of do more with less. I think that, you can create a cube. you could have created a cube, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and that could be a way to scale out collaboration. But the idea of doing that in a way that's also very flexible, in which you have a lot more control and autonomy as a team, and a lot of the companies we're talking to these days are interested in moving the responsibility of data to the teams that produce the data. We're on the product team here. I'm like a little dubious of the data product manager role. I don't know. We'll see if that shakes out. But just the idea of moving it closer to the producers of the data, they're the ones with the context, getting them plugged into how people are going to use this stuff downstream. And I think that's really exciting. I think it's empowering. I think it's one of those places where the technology makes it possible to operate at that level versus the satisficing, make the thing work at all, which is, I think, where we have kind of been for the past couple decades.
Cool. One more question? Who you got Pete? Yeah.
So what advice do you have to master students graduating in this economy?
Sorry, what advice do you have for students?
Yeah, graduating in this economy.
Did you just graduate?
I mean, we're graduating in 2 months.
Okay, early
1 month.
congratulations.
1 month.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Great work.
Thank you.
Learn about large language models.
Apparently that's all that matters. Yeah, right.
Take up art and writing.
I started working in 2007, right before the 2008 crisis at a bank. It was a tech support. It was a part-time job while in school. It was very tough, but I would say just get in somewhere and then do what you want once you're in there. It's really hard to go from college to your dream job. It's really easy to go from a company to something you really like. A lot of companies are looking for people who are passionate and want to do things. They just don't know who that person is. So if you have a way in, it may not be the perfect job for you, but you can bring data to almost any role these days, so that might work.
I would embrace side projects. As someone who looks at a good amount of resumes, it's like a lot of resumes will like generally look the same, but it's always cool if you can see something someone's built, especially, I don't know if you're in like a more technical field or, you know, interested in data, but like, you know, put stuff on GitHub, put stuff out on the internet, use cool tools to build something neat and publish it publicly. Like, that stuff's all at your fingertips, and I think it's a good way to show that you're interested in something and that if you're legitimately passionate about it, go work on it and people will see that.
And write about it too, I think. If you can write, you already stand out from 95% of people out there.
Well, humans don't need to write anymore, right?
That's all I do.
That's right. Yeah, they're coming. ChatGPT's coming for your job first, buddy.
I'm ready.
I'm ready. Let's be outside more. Cool. Well, I'm seeing the flashing lights. It means we're out of time. I want to thank everyone again for sticking around to the last session of the week. I want to thank Pete again for organizing this and doing such a great job and being such a great steward for the data community that's meaningful to so many of us. And I will look forward to seeing you all, if not before, a year from now, back in Austin. We're doing this here again? Right here, 365 days from now.